Hey everyone, my name is Andrew Davis, and you are watching Conversations in Pop Culture. And yes, I am scandalous like an Ashley. And this episode is brought to you by Pocket Jack Comics, which is coming to a local comic store near you in 2024, which is this year. And right now, you can actually check out some free copies of Guinevere and the Divine Factory and Palace of the Golden Princess at PocketJackComics.com to get a free preview copy PDF. Just out for Preston's email list, as well as you should be on the lookout for that coming into, as I stated, your comic shops in March. So definitely look out for all that stuff. It's a good book. It's a fun book. And there's some really, really, really sexy variants coming out. But enough about that, because I have with me John Westhoff. So welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me back. I think three-timer club. I forgot at this point.
Yeah, I forgot too.
It's getting up there.
It's been a while. It's been a while. I stopped keeping count after the first one, but enough about that, because you currently have a funded Kickstarter going on, which is Drumsticks of Doom on Kickstarter, the graphic novel. And obviously, I want to talk a lot about that, but what is that comic book, that graphic novel? Because there's people who know it, there's people who don't know it, there's people who are saying, what is this? It sounds awesome, or I want to know more. So, what is the basic pitch before we really get into the nitty gritty?
Yeah, thanks again for having me. The short pitch is, what if Black Sabbath, not the Beatles, became the most popular band in the world, and thus the universe was changed forever, musically and otherwise? Things like alchemy and strange science are used daily. Heavy metal rules the earth, but our main character, Lana, just wants to play her independent music in a heavy metal world when she finds a magic pair of drumsticks that thrusts her into a war to keep heavy metal at the top of the charts. So that's the short pitch for Drumsticks of Doom. And like you said, we are minimum funded so far. We've got a ways to go, a couple weeks to make some stretch goals and really get this book distributed a lot wider audience. So I'm very excited with how the first week has gone.
Yeah, so let's dive a little bit into the story, because obviously this is issue 1 through 4 in graphic novel. I think it's the first time it's been published in graphic novel format as well.
Definitely.
So obviously this is kind of, I guess, a first edition. And so what is that like? Because graphic novels are very tricky, where you and I have both seen graphic novels barely make it across the finish line. We've also seen them get halfway funded and then struggle the last 2 weeks. And you're kind of in an interesting position where you are minimally funded in an environment that graphic novels are a coin toss sometimes.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And there was some nerves. Anytime you hit that launch button, there's always some nerves. But I've been part of 2 other graphic novels. I had 2 series that we were able to get to graphic novel, but we had a very small print run. They're very expensive to print. If you don't have a large campaign and a large audience, it can be hard to self-publish a graphic novel. People think, well, once you get there, you've gotten through the single issues, you just slap it together and print it. Well, printing, especially, they were both full color books, is a lot. So I'm very grateful, had a small print run of those, but this is the first one for part-time comics since I've done this venture in the last 3 or 4 years. So this is a huge step for us. And like you said, for those outside, the publishing scene, it's a different animal. It's not just as easy as slap the issues together, put it out there, and everyone buys it. When you have no distribution channels, you've got to be mindful of what you're printing, how you're printing. Am I going overseas? Am I going local? What's the budget? How do I price it assertively so that people want to get it? So again, there's a lot of factors that go into it. So this is the first 4 issues. Like you said, we made it through the first arc. Drumsticks of Doom is planned to be 3 approximately 4-issue arcs. So this is the first one, and I think people will get a complete story out of this. They could walk away from this and say, okay, I had a great time in the worlds of Drumsticks of Doom. I hope that they come back, to see where we go. We left enough cliffhangers at the end to leave people wanting more, but I do feel like it was a satisfying, first arc. But again, you don't know. We've had great support for this book. We've sold hundreds of single issues, but you don't know. Are those same backers going to come back and get it? Are new backers waiting for it that didn't want to back it until the trade? Because how comics are.
Let's talk about this, because obviously a graphic novel is very different than a comic, and it's not a story issue. It's a graphic novel sits on a shelf. A comic is bagged and boarded. And obviously I'm being a little facetious when I say that, But there is a massive difference where I feel comics are very much a collecting type thing. I feel people put comics in a long box, and people tend to put graphic novels on a shelf. And I tend to think that a graphic novel is not viewed as a valuable or a collectible the same way a comic book is. And so it's a very different entity. I also think that it's interesting because I know people who say, I'll just wait for the graphic novel. Because if you're overseas and you like physical goods, you don't want to pay for shipping every single time an issue comes out. And then, secondly, sometimes somebody says, look, I just want to read the whole thing at once.
Yep.
Because I'm a binge watcher on Netflix, I'm a binge watcher on a lot of things. So, what is that like? Because we're in a weird time right now with comics. And even just putting out your project is also weird in this time.
Absolutely. And to be honest with you, Drumsticks, the first one launched in January 2021. Now, you know how indie comics go. It took us a while to get through the first arc. Now we're here 3 years later. Now we're on graphic novel number one. And we've seen a lot of the indie scene change a lot in just those few years. Even just each issue was like a roller coaster ride. The first one took off like a rocket and funded quick, and the other three were a grind to the end. So part of that, you're aware of the scene. You've laid out a lot of the issues. When you're selling single issues, some of your buyers are going to be those people who are like, oh, this is a cool low print book. I think I'll just get this to put it in a bag and see if it gets value. Oh, you got a cool variant cover, I'll get that. Graphic novels are different. You're more likely pitching to readers with a graphic novel. More likely, not all. Some might
Did
struggle.
you also feel, and I'm very curious, is that because an indie book, very few indie books can push themselves out and have issue one in quarter one, issue two in quarter two, issue three in quarter three, and issue four in quarter four. Very, very few people can do that and get 4 issues done of a single series in a year, or even 2 years sometimes. If you're lucky if you get it done in 2 years. But now, because there's so much time in between each of these issues, it's almost like a new product to a certain degree when you drop a graphic novel, because I now don't have to wait. And I'm like, oh man, I lost touch with part-time comics. I lost touch with John. I lost touch with this book, but now it's all here for me. And that's where I think graphic novels are interesting. And when you do them, how you do them, and all that stuff, because I think you captured that side, but you could also be like, look, I'm not interested in this and you lost me and I'm not coming back. So it's interesting because I find that part of why you probably find it quickly is that this is almost like a new product that dropped that's readily available to be binged.
And I'm seeing some of the names on there that didn't come back for issue two. That maybe bought to support Dan and I, maybe just thought that was cool, and then they were like, yeah, I'm gonna wait till it's done. And I totally get that. As a reader, you can probably see behind me, there's even more shelves around my office. I am definitely one of those dirty trade waiters, in the industry. I love my trade paperbacks. I love them on the shelf. I'm more of a reader than a collector, so I certainly can appreciate that part of it. But you're right. You'll get people coming in and out, and then, yeah, do they come back for the graphic novel? Or again, are there people who've been following it, these couple of years waiting for it to be done? Maybe we lost them along the way too because of the delays. I do wish, I'll be honest, my one regret with the series is that I had focused and maybe put some other projects to the side and just kind of barreled through Drumsticks instead of, you know, you and I have known each other for a while. I like to balance a lot of plates at once. And sometimes that makes, other projects take a little more time, because budget wise, you can't invest in 5 projects at once. Most of us can't. So I do wish maybe I had done, like you said, maybe got all 4 issues out in a year and a half. But I'm still, the response has been great. It's minimum funding. We've got a ways to go. We've still got some concerns with the budget with the book and kind of the break even mark on this. So we really need, to be honest with you, an $8,000 or $9,000 campaign, but I think we can get there. We've had a great
I want
response.
to table that. I actually want to ask you a question about even balancing. So I have a lot of things on my plate and on my bench or my docket, whatever you want to call it. And what I find is that if I was to drop one of those things and focus solely on the other two, could I get the other two done faster? Could I do it better? Could I do it less stressful? Sure. But I also find that diversification is very important, especially in comics. And I'm curious what you think, because if, let's say, you devoted a year and a half and got Drumsticks done, would it be where it is today as far as you evolving as a writer and as a creator and even as somebody running a business? And then secondly, what if it flops and you just spent 18 months versus the idea of saying, cool, maybe it'll take 3 years, but I'm working on Depowered, I'm working on something else, I'm working on an anthology, and now I have more of a diversified bag. And I think it's a really, really complicated question because if you're a creator, do you go create 4 titles or do you do one really well? And I don't know the answer to that because I haven't created a book, but I also love diversification because let's say Drumsticks 2 was a complete disaster. I mean, like it was negative 5 grand
Mhm.
disaster. Like, but then you're like, I'm committed completely. So I'm just curious what you think because I don't know if that debate's going on in comics publicly, but I think it should.
You know, I think from the writing standpoint, I I think, you're very insightful once again. I do think that the story grew how it should. I think it changed along the way. Dan and I changed along the way, and I think it helped actually help the story to give it a little bit of time to grow, hear what readers liked and didn't like, give the audience a little bit of a chance to grow naturally before we kind of forced it. So in that respect, I do like how it came out. But budget wise, you're right. I was investing in other things, and I'm like that too. I mean, obviously, you see, I like having diverse characters, diverse projects going. That keeps me excited because this is not my income, right? Um, I hope that one day this will be a significant income stream, but for now it's not. I'm gainfully employed, so I do this as a hobby. And I work with working artists that um, they have other projects they're working on as well too. So I don't mind it. I like it, but I would like to set a more regular pace for series that are continuing. Again, 3 years is quite a bit of time. And Dan and I were actually working on it behind the scenes before issue one came out, obviously. So really, I think I pitched it to Dan in July of 2024. So we're coming up on 4 years, and I'm excited too because there's a lot more story. We've already got the next 3 issues written, so I do think I'd like to be at a regular clip now. But you're right. There's a couple things. Me as a creator, do I like it? Yeah, I like a lot of aspects of just kind of letting things simmer and grow and come to me naturally rather than kind of forcing 4 issues out in 4 months. But as a publisher, I would like to see that schedule because I do think that could, like you said, keep some of those readers from, becoming lapsed or losing interest or waiting for the trade or all those things.
This is my take, and this is, I guess, my question. This is going to follow is that I love having a regular schedule and pumping out interviews as an interviewer. Where I love doing stuff on Tuesday, I love doing stuff on Wednesday. Every once in a while I have a Sunday, but that's a bonus to me. That doesn't count towards my weekly quota. And I think it's very important that people say, "Oh, cool, Andrew's going to be on 7:30 on Tuesday, 9 o'clock on Tuesday. Usually it's around 7 and 9 on a Wednesday. Oh, snap, Andrew's on Sunday. Oh, cool, bonus episode, right?
Mhm.
And I think there is something to be said about that and just keeping as much of a schedule as you can. But also I do think that there is a position of natural, growth and getting content out naturally. And then on top of that, I don't even know what a regular schedule will be for you. And because an interview is very low content, producing a book, I mean, if you were producing a book every other month, I think that's a little too much. I do. I think that there's an idea that you can over contentize people. I don't even know if that's a word. If it is, I'm trademarking it. But I think you can give people too much content. And I think you can overburden them and you can drain their bank accounts and you could do serious damage to your customer
I think you're
versus saying if
100%
you're
right.
doing 3 months, if you put out a book every quarter, I don't think you're destroying your customer. It's kind of like you could milk the cow or you could kill the cow. You're going to get your money out of the cow either way. One of them's faster, but one of them doesn't kill your cow. And you're going to have your cow for the next 20 years.
Uh, you know, I again, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think that a lot of us lower level publishers, and that's not a dirty word to me. I'm not afraid to say it. The
It's
readership on
dirty words to
Drumsticks,
me.
um, I, we've printed and sold over 500 copies of issue one. I'm very proud to say that. It's not a huge number, but we've gotten them out there eventually. But now, as far as Kickstarter, the first campaign had 267 backers. The next one had like 219, 197. But when I look at those names, it's like running a comic shop. When you're at this level, it's not like being at Dark Horse or Image where you don't know the 3,000 people who are going to buy it throughout the year. I know a lot of the names that are coming in. It's like having a comic shop. And you're right. When I see those same 50 to 75 names on almost each Kickstarter, you're right. That's why I try to offer like subscription plans to save them on shipping and things like that, because I know these people are coming back and I want to reward them for that. And I think you can. And I think some of my peers have kind of sapped their crowd a little bit. And then they wonder, well, why didn't I get there this time? Well, some of that is attrition, right? Your audience may not have as much. They've moved on to other things. They have other expenses. So you do have to keep that in mind. Now, that being said, I'm stupidly also doing a project every 2 months this year. For the first 3 quarters, we're doing 5 books basically this year with the trade. So I am trying to get on that quarterly 8-week, 10-week schedule this year to see how that works this year. Last year I put out 6 books and that did pretty well. So this year I'm trying for four floppies and 1 graphic novel.
So let's actually talk about your customers, because I understand. Obviously, I sell a lot of books on eBay. I buy a lot of books, and I'm on track to be bringing in a lot of merch and selling a lot of books to people. And I understand my goal is to try to save my customers as much money on shipping as possible. Because if I could save somebody 30, 40, 50 bucks on shipping, that's where I add value. And I think that there's something there where if you're running a campaign every 3 weeks, you should be shipping books to your backers in the same box for a lot of reasons. First and foremost, it's nice to get a big box of comics. It's nice. It's fun. It's fun. I know, because I've gotten them. It's a lot of fun when you get like, oh my God, 20 comics. This is great. Secondly, you're saving money with your backers on shipping. So you should be like, "All right, look, I see that you backed 3 campaigns. If you backed it, figure out how to do it. Because if you save me 30 bucks, there's a good chance I'm going to pump it back into that campaign or another one of yours. There's a really good chance. And also, I'm going to be really grateful. And I think a bunch of people in comics have forgotten how to add value. And value could just be a thank you note. It could just be a thank you note. You have no idea how many times I appreciate when somebody shoots me a message after an interview back. Really appreciate you having me on. I know that you got me in at the last second, and I appreciate it. It goes a long way, and I don't think that certain people have figured that out.
I agree. I think sometimes we get into the routine of it. We lose the excitement as creators, but you're right. We have to be grateful for those backers we have, those customers that we have. And yeah, I've done subscription plans in the past with other companies. And again, I did one last year where it was like, okay, if you back Drumsticks and you back this next campaign, back through Backer Kit, I'll add them. You don't pay any shipping. And people seem to like that. Again, I think we had 57 people come back from Drumsticks to get the books. And that's a huge deal, because you're right. People do remember that you're like, okay, you're being mindful of my funds. I might have bought these 3 books separately. And that would have cost me an extra 20 bucks. Or maybe I was only going to buy 1, but now I'm going to buy 3 because that was the shipping I was going to pay on 1 anyway. Let's just throw it back in. So I try to do that because I like it too. We are going to try to do that again this year. If you back, the first campaign, single issue, if you want these 4 issues that are coming out this year, pay one price and we'll ship them to you all in August or September when they're all done, and see how that goes. See if people buy into that subscription plan, because that's something I've wanted to do again for a while.
And then the other thing you mentioned that I want to talk about is, and I have a different opinion than everybody else. And so what I'm curious is that you talk about people, lack of attrition, lack of interest, lack of other things. And my whole thing is that I don't even think it's lack of interest. I just think there's a lot of better product out there. I think there's a lot of better variants. I think there's a lot of better, stories. I think there's more interesting ideas. I don't know, maybe there's not better stories. Maybe it's the same good story level per se, but I digress. But there's a lot of interesting concepts, and also there's a lot of price now in play where I can go buy a book for 10 bucks, or and so that's a factor. And look, I buy a lot of books. I buy a particular subsection of a book, but I do buy a lot of books from a lot of different companies. And so the way I feel is that if you have a Kickstarter, you're competing not anymore against Kickstarter. It's not versing Kickstarter. It's versing Merc Mag. It's versing Big Dog Inc. It's versing Zenoscope. It's versing, Stupid Little Monkey. It's versing Bad Donut and Zombie Eat Flesh. I mean, Mount Olympus is another one. You're competing against Pat Shan's, Cheeky Company. You're competing against a bunch of people who not necessarily do Kickstarter books. I mean, there's a comic shop near where I live in Harrison, and they do It's All Yeah Comics, and they do like Little Teen Titans. So like you're competing against all of that. So I'm curious what you feel, because that's what I've noticed, is that there's a lot of product out there and it's not just Kickstarter. And I feel that's the biggest change in comics right now.
Yeah, these last few years, a lot of people, including myself, before pandemic came, I was planning to make a comeback, and I'd taken a couple years off. And then during the pandemic, a lot of us, we had extra time. We were, feeling anxious, whatever reason. A lot of people put their passion projects out there. So, but there's more product than ever out there. So you're right. As much as we hate to say it, and a lot of us think it's a dirty word, but there is some competition there. And I don't mean that in, Pat Shand wants me to fail so that he can succeed. No, I mean that you better put out something good or something different or something unique, because there's so many things to look at. You're only going to be in front of someone's eyes for a few minutes. So you better try to capture them, because that is the name of the game, right? You do want people to pick up your books and read them. So
Did you also feel that there's also a lot more money behind certain people now, where there's a bunch of people and there's a bunch of companies and they push out a lot of product, they push out a lot of money behind their product. And I'm not saying this to flaunt at all. I don't think they're trying to flaunt. I just think that they're saying we are all in and we are going to have the top artists and we're going to spend a lot of money to have product that kicks ass.
yeah, and I think, again, a lot of us independent publishers have really taken that step to say, we can put out the best books and we can succeed at a high level on our own. And I think that's great for the industry in general, but that also, if you're not putting out product up to speed, then you're going to be disappointed. That's when you're going to see, I've seen a lot of peers, stumble and get frustrated, but it's like, okay, you got to regroup and say, what, you're not comparing yourself directly to somebody, but what are they doing to succeed that I can replicate?
That's interesting, because what I've figured out is that I stopped looking. I look at what everybody does, and then I say, cool, where are they missing on their execution, and how do I find something that they're not doing that nobody's in? This is how I got into my whole eBay business in the sector that I'm in, is nobody was there. And now people are there, but I have been in this space for a long time, probably about 5 years. And in the beginning, 5 years ago, it was an open road and there was endless amounts of money, endless. And I just wasn't really where I am skillfully enough in my business that I am today. But now everybody's caught on, but it was a very blue ocean. So I look at a company like Merck, or I look at a Zenoscope, or I look at a Big Dog Inc. I'm like, great, what are they doing? I want to mimic their success and have what they're doing, but what's the next big thing that they're missing? Because that's where I want to be. And that's what I think is interesting, because I see a lot of people talking about trying to copy, but I don't see them saying, cool, where are we going next? And so I'm curious what you think, because that's my biggest peeve with comics right now.
Yeah, I do think if you want to have those 3-figure campaigns and those, huge ones, you got to be thinking one step ahead, right? Now, I don't necessarily have that philosophy at Part-Time Comics, just because Part-Time Comics is a warehouse for my stories, that with people that I want to work with, our stories. So I put out the books that I want to see made and stories that I want to work with people on. So, again, not having to have that burden of, I need this next campaign to be 5 figures or I'm a bust. I think that helps, me stay in a kind of a slow and steady mindset. I can focus on what didn't work for my last campaign. What do my peers say that is working for them, and kind of each campaign get better. But you're right. I think, again, when you have I don't want to say overcrowded, but it is pretty crowded out there. There's a lot of books every month. You walk in any comic shop, there's thousands of them, hundreds of them coming out every month. So, if you want to stand out in that crowd, you got to be one step ahead, and you can't be going back to the well of what was hot 5-10 years ago. And I still see some of that.
I agree, but you can go back 20 or 30 and you can bring back the 90s.
There you go, and that's what's going right now, right? You gotta be careful how far you reach back, right? Everything's cool 20 years ago, but 10 years ago not as cool. Like it still blows my mind that, and no shade on anybody who's doing it, but I don't, the zombie craze came and went, and I still see people, kind of making books, and it's like, to me that's a harder sell, because that's something that's been kind of driven into the ground right now. But that's just my opinion.
But I do want to back at it. I do want to talk a little bit about the business stuff that you mentioned earlier, and even going back to getting minimally funded, and obviously producing a graphic novel is expensive, and obviously this is not as expensive as if you were starting from scratch, where you have all the files, but you still got to figure out how to print it. You got to figure out how to make it work. You got to figure out, printing a graphic novel not the same as printing a comic book. You have to add new things into it. You have to add new artwork to some degree. You might have to remaster some stuff. And so what is this like? Because this is where I think it gets tricky, is that how many do you print? How much money do you have? How much money do you pump in from your side? And the reason why I say this is because you obviously want product that you want to sell, because now when you go to your con table, you have a graphic novel on it. That's a product that hits a different demographic.
Right.
And so what is that like? Because obviously you're funding it on Kickstarter and you want to get your backers their books. They are entitled to that. But then you also say, cool, do I spend another $2,000 or
Right.
$3,000? And do I basically go fill up a pod's warehouse, for lack of a better word?
Yeah.
No, it sounds crazy. I mean, you're laughing because you know where I'm going with it, right?
Yeah.
But
No, I definitely have books here that I've overprinted because of that. You get to that point where, what's that sweet spot for the price point where I can have some on hand for many years and just really be turning a profit on it anytime I sell it. That's where you want to go.
because the more you print, right, the
Yeah,
cheaper it becomes.
exactly.
Because if you could offset print your graphic novel, it becomes cheaper, but it's also a lot more money up front. I think you could offset print a graphic novel. I might be mistaken about that. I've never printed a book, so if
Yeah.
I
Oh
am,
yeah, you definitely can.
so but if you can offset print a graphic novel, you're going to pay significantly less.
Right.
But it could also be that you're just dropping 10K in a book. I don't know if it would be 10K, but you're dropping maybe 5, 6, 7 grand.
And I know a lot of my peers, they do shoot for that, right? They want that $9,000-$10,000 order where they're getting 2,000 books and they're going to have them until they die, basically. Co-creator on the book, Dan Doherty, amazing artist and co-creator on Drumsticks of Doom. He did that with his graphic novel Touching Evil. And again, you get it to a price point where it's like, okay, I can print 500 for $4,000. I can print 1,000 for, $4,500, and then I can print 2,000, for 5,500. You're always kind of trying to push it because it brings that price point down. But then you get into storage, safely maintaining the books, shipping them over here, all those things too factor into it. But definitely, for me at least, 1,000 is like the sweet point. Then you've got enough on hand, and then you're not feeling too bad if you end up going back to a reprint, because obviously if you reprint, you start over as far as the count. So then did I leave money on the table by not printing a bunch? But I have, the few times I've really overprinted single issues, my wife loves to tease me because we still have stacks of them in the closet over here. So sometimes you can overprint, and end up, with more product than you really need, end up giving them away or just having them forever. But if you have the space, it's not a big deal. But the more books you put out, yeah, there's diminishing returns because your whole house, or you end up buying storage space and then spending money on that.
Because the reason why I bring this up is that I hear people talk, and I hear people talk about the business of comics, and I don't hear people talking about this and the pros and cons of this, because there is, an idea saying, look, I'm going to print an extra 100, and I don't really care about the price point because storage is an issue. Also, capital on hand and having, $1,500 in my bank account for my next comic project might be worth more if an idea strikes or something strikes across in my comic business. that could be beyond helpful. So I think there's that argument, but then there's also the idea that, well, if I print 1,000 copies, it's going to take me 5 years to move them. But guess what? I have 17 more campaigns in the next 5 years coming, and this is an easy add-on that slides right in. Cons matter, single issues matter, and it's I just saved $3-4 on a book per
Yep.
book, which means
Yeah.
it's more money. But then it becomes a massive debate, and I don't see this conversation occurring. I don't. And granted, I haven't been around many conversations since I think last October in this sector. But when I was around it, I didn't see this happening at
Well, I
all.
will tell you, I'm in several great groups. I have an awesome set of creators. We talk about this all the time. Where do you print from, and how much you get it for, and how much are you going to print, and why didn't you print this? And I still have a lot of peers that prefer to keep the stock low so that they're not, swimming in it if they, don't have the space for it. But I'm always pushing for it. You know what? You get a price break at 250. You get a price break at 500. You get a price break at 1,000. Think about it, because again, I'm in it for the long term, right? It's not just about this campaign. It's about Drumsticks of Doom issue 12, which I hope will come out eventually someday. And how can I still have product on hand then, in a reasonable fashion? So I'm always thinking about that long term. At least for me, and I know a lot of other people are as well, and always trying to figure it out.
No, I mean I love discounts. I have
I'm a sucker for it, man. If it's like, I'll spend that extra. I'll take it out of, like you said, you shouldn't, but I'll reach into my own wallet and be like, well, it's only a couple hundred more. I might as well. But I think that really helps the bottom line down the road. I could print, you know, 10 buttons for $10 each, or if I print 100, they're $50, and then they're 50 cents each. I sell them for $2. Now I'm making a profit. That's stuff. It's stuff I don't like to think about. I know you don't shy away from it. It's kind of, your whole focus of your thing. So I always appreciate conversations like this, which, I think we need to get a little uncomfortable with what we're uncomfortable with, because it's part of the whole game.
No, yeah. I mean, look, it is. I don't think people have a real conversation about risk assessment with comics. I don't think people have a real assessment of, okay, I'm hiring this variant. What's the break even point? How does my page count affect this? And also, if you're going to print 3, 4, 7 printings of it, that also affects it. If you're going down that path, but obviously, until you're going down that path, but obviously, what is your book's break even point? And that is complicated. And I do have that formula. And I've actually, my friend is a math whiz, and he built it for me, and I can tell you exactly what that formula looks like. But it's an important one, and I don't think that people have those conversations. I don't know how many creators actually know their break even point in their books.
No.
Because your break even point is calculated. You have four covers. Each of those covers has a break even point. And it depends on your cover artist. It depends on your colorist, your inker. If you're the writer, and you have to put that into it, you have to say, I don't know what you're worth as a writer, but that
Right.
should be factored into it without a doubt. Even if you didn't pay
Absolutely.
yourself.
And most of us don't do that, right? We don't factor in our own time. We're just like, we're just doing this. And I think some of that, it leads to a high degree of burnout in the industry too, is that we don't try to figure out a way to compensate ourselves for our time. We end up getting, burnt out by not seeing the returns, not being smart. I think I'm guilty of this. I did it on Drumsticks of Doom. I ended up over budget on multiple issues because I love the bonus pages. I love that feeling of, oh, this story just needs this one scene. And I'm not discouraging anyone from doing it. It's your book. Do whatever you want. But I see so many of my peers put out the big fat issue, and they don't account for how much more that costs to print, more to make, more time, your time. I love the fat 32-page issue, but you have to factor that in, because that is it's a lot of cost in that. And you won't necessarily see that return over if you had just made it 28 pages or 24. Is that reader going to go, oh man, this longer issue really, got me back for issue 2? It might, but I think it's a conversation we all need to have.
Do you think, because I'm a strong believer, so I can't tell you who I was speaking to about this, but I sold a book to somebody last night, and I
Okay.
wasn't going to carry the other 8 variants. So I actually directed that person to that site on the other 8 variants. Person was grateful off of eBay, and then he was looking for another book, and I actually directed him to somebody else who probably made $100 sale because I didn't have that book. And my theory on the whole thing was that I I could have facilitated this whole deal and bought all the stuff and then sold them and jacked up the price with ease. And I could have made a clean like $200 in easy. And then I could have done the other deal. I probably could have made another 100 on that as well. But I didn't, because what I realized is that why don't I guess, make my life easier on business, refer business to other people. And guess what? That buyer is going to be in debt to me. And next time I have a cover he wants, he's not even going to hesitate to reach out to me. And so in my opinion, is that I think adding value and running a clean business and actually producing something and maybe spending that extra money if you're playing the long game. So if you take a $500 loss because you want an extra 600 pages or another, $1,000 loss, but if you're playing the long game with your book and it's a better product, I think this is the issue now, is that I think you need to have a better product. And I don't know if you need to make money on round one, but that's where this gets tricky, right? Because you do need to make money to do issue 2. Because running a business, and I understand that, and feel free to tell me I'm wrong. Anybody, you're more welcome to tell me I'm wrong, is when you start a business, you do not become profitable. It is very hard to run a profitable business in year one. It can be done, but it took me about 18. Actually, that's not true. I actually ran a pretty profitable business in year one of me back in high school. But not the point. Not the point. When you're selling a $2 item, you're selling for $10. It's hard not to be profitable. But the point is that in the last 18 months, I pumped a lot of money into what I'm doing on eBay, and now it's starting to become profitable and becoming healthy. And so I think that's just how I view it, is that those extra 6 pages or that extra cover or that extra splash page, you're adding value. And if you're looking at a long term and you have 7 years to sell your book, it's very easy to make your money back if you have a long, run.
Like we added 4 pages to the first issue. I was happy with it. I think it was a better issue overall. It continued the story on. It was part of a stretch goal, so people got excited, like, oh, the story is going to continue after this issue. So I do think it's value added. And you're right. You can't always be so short-sighted, but those things add up too. You can't do, then if I did that the next issue, and then the next issue, and then the next issue. Now I'm getting to the trade and I'm, still, in the hole, which by the way I am. And those mistakes add up, because then, like you said, then you don't have capital to work on other things, or you're going in the hole to get this other project going. So just like covers, yes, maybe that one extra cover by this great artist will bring in those eyes, but when you get to cover 6, cover 7, cover 8, are you going too far? Again, I can't. That question isn't a yes or no answer.
The risk assessment. That's what
exactly.
It goes down to.
If this is what my audience wants, then yeah. But yeah, that's a lot of what we have to balance every day here.
I mean, going into that, I know plenty of people who spent, 45 to $6,000 on covers alone. They raised 17,000, and you still had to produce the book. You still had to print the book. You're making no money. If you spend 6,000 to 7,000 on covers alone, on 10 to 15 covers, when you calculate all the variants, you're making no money. You're making no money, and that's just on art. That's not printing a book. I mean, you can't run a business, a campaign, a story, and you can't do anything. And then to even go to the next round, I mean, now you have to start over from scratch. Or let's say you recouped, maybe, you got your return of capital and you still lost money. You know what? Or maybe you didn't lose money, but you don't have anything to live on because all of it's going to the next issue. I mean, that's a real issue. And again, it goes to risk assessment, because I want to find products and interviews that get me where I need to be in the most efficient way. And so when I buy a product, I mean, I legitimately bought a book last night and I sold it in 2 hours. I don't even have the book. That is pure efficiency. Where and I knew when I bought it, I knew how the book was going to behave. And I try to do that over and over and over again, because that's what I want. I want efficiency, and I want not to be in a trap where I don't have my capital back. Usually I like to get my capital back in 6 months.
I think that's a good target.
But I don't know. What do I know? But I mean, I'm curious because I know plenty of creators, and I'm sure you do too, who are broke.
Yeah.
And not to put anybody on blast and not to make anybody nervous, but if you have kids and you have young kids and you're broke, I mean, the question should be, how are they going to go to college?
Hmm.
And I think I'm not saying don't do your dream, but
You're
this is
right.
the risk assessment. So I don't have kids, everybody, but when I do, obviously my business is going to change. Risk is going to change in my business. Right now, my business is in high risk, high reward, and I love it. But at a certain point, I have a day job too, so I'm relatively stable in
Right.
that regard. But I'm going to take probably less risks once I'm funding my kids' college.
Absolutely.
And I think it's a real issue. And I think this is something that, again, I'm not in these circles, but I don't think that this gets spoken about either very publicly. Very publicly. I don't think people understand how to even do risk assessment.
Well, and I will say in the private circles I'm in, people are talking about it more, but I do think in the 15 years I've been creating, it isn't talked about enough because you have to factor in. Again, I'm like that too. I'm a social worker by day. I would never discourage anyone from chasing their dream. Right? That's what life is all about. But you're right. You have to do some risk assessment. You have to say, if my dream is going to mortgage everything for the people that I care about that support me every day, then it crosses the line. Now it's a selfish endeavor, right? And again, I would never tell someone if your dream is to write for the Amazing Spider-Man, go at it every day. You know, chase your dream. But if you're spending thousands of dollars to drive around the country and to go to Marvel Comics and go to these conventions and pitch your ideas, again, what's your return on investment? You got to be able to see that, and a lot of people can't do that, right? They can't say, "But it's my dream." But then maybe your dream shouldn't be that specific. Maybe it should just be to write a comic, and then you can do that, right? You don't have to write a 100 issue epic and it sink 100 grand into it, and do a Kickstarter every other month. Maybe you can just write one single comic and go from there. Um, I think sometimes there can be a lot of factors that to drive people down that road. But again, like you said, I'm in the same boat. I'm gainfully employed. I have a good job. My wife has a good job. So I don't have the same stresses. I'm not trying to get out of, into a new career. I'm not trying to, escape any, anything like that. So I feel very privileged that I can create, from that starting point. But I just it does, and I do feel like my peers are talking about it more. I do appreciate that people are being more honest about it. People are more open in the community because I hate to see my peers burn out, get frustrated,
Yeah.
get divorced. Things like that happen because we're so you know laser focused
I'll
on
be
our
honest.
dream.
I'll be honest. I see it happening, and I'm very, very cynical about this. Where I don't think that people are having a real discussion on this. I really, really, really do not feel it from what I've seen, and I've seen way less than you, and I've heard tidbits and I've heard other things. I don't think 99% of you have any idea how to do proper risk analysis. And I understand it sounds weird from somebody who's looking in, and I'm hearing pieces of it, but I don't think it's being done correctly. And I really see the results of it on campaigns. I see money mismanagement, and you know what is I don't think it's their fault. I don't. I think it's just the fact that it is a skill that takes years.
It is a skill, and it's the failing of many a small business in general, right? We all know
Oh,
this is common knowledge. It
absolutely.
could be studied. Most small businesses fail because people go into it thinking not having the knowledge they need to go into it, and then they fail. But comics is littered with it, right? It's not even just the Kickstarter group. It's all the way to the top. You have companies going out of business all the time because
It's very public in comics
yeah,
because comics are a product, and
right.
that base is very active and very opinionated and very open. Versus if you are selling life insurance, the life insurance somebody's like, life insurance, guys, let's have a podcast about life insurance and get all excited about it. It doesn't happen that way. Nothing wrong with life insurance. And if you have a podcast and you see this, I'm sorry. But people don't get as excited for life insurance the same way they do saying, man, where's my book?
Yeah.
I want to read your awesome book about a robot that has a gun that floods the planet and
Well, let me write
awesome.
this
I want to
down.
read it. And where's the book, man?
I need to write that down. Need to write this robot gun comic, but you're right. It is
And
a
then
different
he has 3
medium.
friends that join him, and then they transform into vehicles. Oh man,
What?
this idea is gold. It's
This
just
is
gold.
You're giving away free gold. But you're right. I think that is a big issue, and yeah. I mean, in a lot of walks of life, but especially in comics, we go into it with the passion and the desire, but we don't want to slow down and gain the knowledge that we need to, be successful. And again, I say this all the time. Success to me doesn't mean you're having the 5-figure campaigns every time. You're having the 6-figure campaigns. You have 500 backers. Success can be 50 backers. It can be the joy of, a few people reading your book, whatever you define success as.
I was listening to Tom Shalhoub, and I'm going to probably misquote him on this, but the definition of professional success and the definition of success are different. So I think a bunch of people go into comics trying to achieve professional success in comics. Professional success means you are trying to do your job with excellence. So you are doing something, you are making a living doing a job. You do your job well, and you're striving to achieve excellence at your job. That is the basic definition of professional success. Now, success is very different, has a different definition. I could say I interviewed John and I had a successful interview.
Oh, no.
I'm not making a living off of this, but I had a successful outing.
Right.
Where you say, hey, I went on a date with a girl and I got a second date. I guess the date was successful.
Right.
So, and there's nothing wrong with having success.
Absolutely.
So you could run a Kickstarter and you did 10,000, but you're not making a living directly off of that Kickstarter. Maybe you made $1,000, but you obviously have a day job, and that's fine. But I think people confuse the two. I really do.
Absolutely. And I think it starts with saying that to yourself. What is my definition of success? What does success look like for me? And again, for me, having a couple hundred readers is successful. I can get, my artists their page rate. I feel good about that. I pay people on time. I have these books at the end of the day that I get to look at and I enjoy. So that's success to me. But I do think a lot of people say that they'll ask, how do I break into comics? That's the comment. Are you asking? How do I sell a lot of comics? How do I get my name recognized in the comics community? Because that's different than, my definition of breaking into comics, which is just make a comic and you've broken into comics. It has one of the lowest barriers of any entertainment field. You can get into it very easily. But if your answer is how do I, make financial success? Well, that's a whole different thing.
I mean, look. This is, nobody asks me anything because I don't. But I can provide guidance on business. I would say, what is the purpose of why you want to create a business? What is the purpose of why you want to create a product? And do you just want fame? Do you want glory? Do you want your name recognized? Or do you want to make money? Because those 4 things are very different. So I run an eBay business. I want to sell comics. I want to run a business, and I want to make money. So I want to do it ethically as I possibly can, but I'm not interested in saying, because if this product becomes bad, I will move to the next product, and I won't diddle daddle on it. Where I bought 10 books that just were bad product. It happens for whatever reason. I took a fly on them. It's $100. Great, no worries. But then sometimes I'll buy bad product that become really good product. And I'm like, oh boy, I bought that for $100 and now I just sold that for $1,000. I'm doing all right. So, but again, I asked myself, what type of business I want to run? Because I want to make money and I want to have a side hustle that is lucrative and relatively easy and also gives me a thrill. Because there's nothing, and I'm going to say this the nicest way I could say it, there is nothing like finding the deal of the year in comics. There's nothing like it. Every month there's a deal. In the past 3 weeks, there's been like 20 of them. Hey, Taylor Swift. I'm just saying, those comics are awesome.
Yeah.
They deserve an award for January. They are the book for January.
I did not know that.
I'm excited. Anybody who's watching tomorrow, I think either 12 or 2 p.m., Greg Horn has a variant of that, and that book's going to be red freaking hot.
Wow. I didn't know
because the Chiefs are playing in the Super Bowl.
I hadn't heard that. Are they?
They are, apparently. Who knew? It's going to be a red on red Super Bowl. The 49ers are red. Oh, it's see if the Lions won, we could have had red versus blue.
Yeah, what the heck?
And then one of the team could have been the good guys, and they could have come out with Master Chief, and then the other. It would have been great. It would have been Halo all over again. But no, we couldn't.
Blew it. Guys. The Lions blew it.
They did. They did. Wow, they did. It broke my heart. It broke my heart.
It broke my heart too.
I'm not even a Lions fan.
Me neither. I'm a Cubs and Bears fan, so I'm a fan of the teams that historically stink. So I felt for him.
but I digress. I digress. But I do want to at least mention a few things about your book. So obviously you have some interesting rewards before we get into something controversial, and we're always going to end on something controversial. But I think you have a regular cover. I think you have a Make 100 cover. I think you have all 4 single issues available. I think you have a special metal cover, and then I think you also have.
We got some metal, some real. You can never videotape these, but we got all the real metal covers. We have all the covers still in print. First print runs of everything still there. So we've got some cool stuff because, we've had quite a few people just back the singles that maybe missed it. We know not everybody's in it for the graphic novel, so we want to make sure we got everything. We've got all kinds of bonus items, 3D drumstick holders, keychains, beard combs. We got all kinds of fun stuff.
And what I think is interesting, and I mentioned the metal thing because you haven't done a metal cover yet, and that's what's cool about this is that it's kind of interesting that you're doing something that really fits your book.
Yeah, and it's funny because I thought that was one of the worst gimmicks in comics history until I was walking by Brian Polito's booth at C2E2, and he had a Metal Lady Death cover, and I picked it up and I said, "Holy crap! I have a metal comic. Why don't I have a metal covers?" And it just seemed to fit. So because it kind of fits with the theme, and they look amazing, we print them through Fairy Photography. They do an excellent job. They're real metal on affixed to the cover. You get the book with it. They're really cool. And I feel like we sell them at a very competitive price. I do see a lot of my peers selling them a lot higher because they are very expensive to print. But I did want to kind of see how people would back them. So, you can get all of them at all 4 issues at a discount price.
Yeah, no, I like my metal covers. I think I think they are gimmicky. I think they are a little gimmicky. I'll be honest. It's getting a little over the top now. Everybody's doing it, and there's nothing special. When only a few people were doing it, it was like, oh man, you guys do metal books. Now I'm like, you're doing metal books. But it depends on the cover too. There's some awesome ones, but also I feel like now it's just you just want a metal book.
Yeah. But I've always struggled with that. Even variants in general, I was very slow to come around on because I just wanted to pop down my book and people to buy it. But talking to people like you and Matt Knowles and some of my other great peers, they convinced me, John, you put it out there. If people don't want it, they won't back it. You don't have to dictate what the consumer wants. Let them choose what they want. And again, pick the things you like and enjoy, as part of your book. You don't have to put anything out there. I don't have to do 17 variant covers, but I certainly can pick 2 or 3 really amazing ones. And I've say whatever you want about the book. I do feel confident that I pick, very good artists to work with. I think, all of our covers are top notch and they really stand out.
Let's actually talk about that because I'm curious. And I'm not going to tell you what I think because I want to ask you unbiasedly. How do you feel? Because you answered it partially, but how do you feel about variants and everybody's doing them and all that? Because I feel, and you kind of, and I know I'm going to be reiterating, but I think after I tell you my opinion, you might slightly get where I'm coming from on this question. But I feel it's tricky and complicated. Might be a good way to put it, where it is a game at this point.
Yep, and I think I even said that at the start of our interview. It's all part of the game, and I am someone who struggles with the game. Like I said, it took me a long time. Several of our first books didn't even have a variant cover with them, and I had to come around to the game a little bit. that helps keep the books going. So don't, thumb your nose at it like, you're this purist comic person that only wants, one trade cover and one single issue cover, and that's it. It's part of what you have to do. There's such low margins on comics. To produce them is so high that you have to do it. There is no other way around it.
The reason why I bring this up and the reason why I ask this is that I feel we are in a very complicated trap, and we are in a black hole, for lack of a better word, where it is slowly sucking everything to its center. And I think that it's a slow descent. And look, I'm a guy whose business is built on the back of variants
Right.
and limited runs. But I've realized that I don't think it's completely hollowed out the industry, but I think it's done some serious damage because I think it's been overly done. When every comic shop, when everybody needs a variant, when independent people say, I want a variant, and when I'm looking to pick up a 3,000 print run and a 1,000 print run and drop 9 Gs for my eBay store on a variant, we've reached a point of critical mass.
Yeah,
And,
I think we reached that a long time ago. But again, I think, and I don't, it's not my favorite part, but again, if you find a way to do it that you enjoy it, like, again, I've worked with some amazing artists. A lot of them are my friends. I certainly appreciate, if I'm going to spend money on a variant, I want to give it to somebody I'm close to. So I've enjoyed that. I make connections through it as well. They help promote your book. There's all kinds of benefits to it that I'm not saying I'm doing it kicking and screaming. I found a way to make it work for me, but I do think that it's a negative part of the industry, like you said, that we're closing in on ourselves.
Because I'll be honest, and I don't know how you back people, but I'm a big Greg Bill Watson fan. I'm a big Sen Kumanaki fan. So if your book had a Sen Kumanaki, I wouldn't even care what your book's about. I wouldn't care. I've been in. So that's the point, is that so there are certain people that I love their artwork, right? There's certain people I love their Christmas covers. Mike DeBaffo is a good example. He does a mean Christmas cover for a bunch of companies, and I love that cover he does, and I always buy it, and I don't buy anything else from that company that he does it for. And so that's a real issue where it's a variant trap. And look, I love variants and I love art because I can't draw. So when somebody has an awesome thing, I'm like, man, that's dope. I want that. It looks cool. But I'm saying, great, what happens when this artist leaves? What happens when this artist is no longer available? What happens when you can't afford this artist? I mean, that's what happens. What happens when this artist signs exclusivity? Peach Momoko, Shikari, both of those two individuals are exclusive. I think Peach Momoko is massively exclusive to Marvel, and Shikari is massively exclusive to Comics Elite, Merc Mag, Legends Publishing, a few other places. I think, Shikari might be lent out to here and there. But again, what happens when you built, a business on X and then it's gone? Mm-hmm. And that's the problem with variants. And so I'm all for variants. I just think that it is a game, and I think it is a big trap.
Yeah, and I started Part-Time Comics with the intent of graphic novels only. I think that is the wave of the future as far as comic storytelling. But again, as far as comic finance, I don't think we can get away from the variants. The singles, people love them. Like you said, there's different audiences for both. So I think you kind of have to offer both if you want to stay afloat right now.
I was speaking to somebody, and I can't go too much into detail, but they are really struggling because they're trying to produce good quality comics cheaply. And I don't think I feel free to disagree with me. The only way to do that is by selling in volume. That is the answer. So if you're selling 5,000 copies every single Kickstarter of your campaign, you could sell your book for $5 to $6 easy, because you can
absolutely. But then you're talking about, then you're gonna have someone else pay to ship it and all that, and then you're gonna into distribution costs. If you're selling them in comic shops, you're taking a huge hit on that. So you got to move some volume to make it on a single floppy that's $4.99. You got to sell some hell of volume.
My point is that if you're table and shipping aside, let's say you're charging $7 shipping. Let's say your buyer pays the shipping. Whatever, everybody agrees it's $10 with shipping, right? Pretty affordable, I would argue. If a $10 on for like a Steph Wilson on Kickstarter for $10, I don't think you're going to beat that price. I don't think if that included shipping. But if you're moving 5,000 copies, that can work. But when you're only moving 500 copies, you're going to be in the hole. There's no way you can make any money. And even, let's say shipping was free for whatever reason, you had some superpower and shipping was free, even still, you're going to just break even.
Yeah.
So
that's the nature of the game. So you kind of have to do the variants, the other stuff, the metal covers, the keychains, the stickers, that all helps really just offset, the cost of the books. Especially again, if you're paying competitive rates to your teams and trying to keep them working and everything like that. If you have somebody who's willing to work with you, and just go in 50-50, that's a great thing. I've worked with tons of projects with amazing creators like that, but that doesn't always happen, right? So,
and let's be realistic. Maybe it shouldn't always happen either.
No, because then again, you get people don't value their time, and then that's I was in a whole company that burnt out because of that, because we were spending hundreds of hours a year making these books and never really seeing a return on them, because it was just kind of handshake deals, and we didn't have a real plan going, because we were just friends making comics, which was great. I love that, but
I didn't even think about it like that. I was thinking about it along the lines of, all of a sudden you get, let's say that I give you 50% of my whole podcast, right? What happens when there's a disagreement? What happens when there's a problem? What happens when all this other stuff happens? Do I really want to give you equity in what I'm doing? Because let's say like I needed art, or I needed a script, or I needed something from you. Maybe it's cheaper for me to pay you $1,000. It's a done deal. You give me what I need. And I say, hey, could you help promote it a little bit? I need a little promotion. Could you retweet my thing here and there? We work that out. Hopefully you're willing to do that. But again, instead of me giving you equity, because I don't think equity should be given very lightly. I don't. And then I'm very, very, I would never give equity out on this. I would rather pay somebody. I paid editors. I paid people for, other things dealing with this. Again, I'm not going to give somebody equity in my company, because equity is expensive and equity creates bigger problems. Because what happens when that person owns 10% or 20% and they say, I don't want to work here with you anymore?
Yeah.
What happens then? You have to have contracts. You have to have the 4Ds. It sucks.
And I think that happens, with a lot of people. And it happened with me. We didn't have a big falling out, but we clearly weren't on the same path. So then how do you have that conversation, with people you're still friends with and that you still want to work with, but their goals are not your goals? It definitely muddies the waters, and part of why I kind of went into it individually this time. But maybe another conversation for another time. But I do appreciate the talk as always. I know you joke about what do you know, but if anything, if anybody wants to stretch their mind a little bit and like I said, get into those uncomfortable zones that we don't talk about in comics, you're always a good conversation to have, and kind of think outside the box in regards to how we work in comics.
It's a shame I don't get on more shows. That's all I'm gonna say. I don't have time. And I'm busy, and I'm very open about it. And honestly, I figured out that I'm a much better host than I am a guest. And again, I don't think people, and I'll be very honest about this, I don't think people take me seriously because I haven't produced a book. Yet I sell a lot of them. So I come at things a very different way than other people. And I think it's an unfortunate shortcoming of the industry, is you don't need to produce a book to have insight on how things are done. I've never worked on an oil rig. I know exactly how an oil rig works. So, it's not hard to understand, but I digress. But I do want to give you a chance to promote yourself. Because I can tell you got to get out of here. You didn't shoot me a message, but I think you got to get out of here. I gave the sense of that. So
yeah, I got another little one I got to check on, but I do appreciate it. I hate to cut you short, but best place to find me, Linktree, Part-Time Comics with an X, pretty much on every social media, except for Instagram. We're part_time_comics, because that's how Instagram works. But we're on all the major social medias, so please hit us up. I'm very active on Twitter and Facebook. I'm always happy to answer questions like Andrew and I are talking about today. I don't shy away from, sharing my experience. Again, it's only my experience, but I do feel like I in 15 years, I have, some things to say. But yeah, I'm always happy to answer. I get lots of new creators that say, "Hey, I'm launching my first Kickstarter. What do you think? Will you look at it?" I enjoy giving back to the community in that way, as people did for me when I started 15 years ago. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And of course, we also understand not everybody financially can support the books, but if you see our links bouncing around, any share really helps in this day where social media is really just putting the squeeze on us. Any share helps, even if you have two followers on your timeline. It all helps. It all snowballs. So, a share is just as good as a back these days. So I appreciate it if anybody can share the links out.
Yeah, and I've been saying it, I'm going to keep saying it. You got to support indie. What that means is when people have comics out there or they have independent projects, whether that's a film, a comic book, a board game, whatever you want it to be, and they're funding either themselves or on Kickstarter, or they're at a con. Obviously, buying their book is helpful. It is a big deal to do that. As well as sharing out links, supporting them, even throwing $1 on a Kickstarter sometimes helps. If everybody threw $1, at a Kickstarter, a lot of small money can become very big very quickly. So if you have a 5,000 person email list and everybody threw in $1, that's $5,000 right there, and your graphic novel would be funded. So there you go. But all jokes aside, it is very important to be supportive, and support is not just money, it's social media. And then as far as I'm concerned, while John might not want your money, I do. So I expect everybody who's watching this and seeing this to give me at least $5. I have some links down below that you can click, and I expect the money to be in my account. Very much so. I don't work for free, guys. No. All jokes aside. Obviously I get it. Money's tight. Everybody needs media. I get it. There's a lot of ways that you could be supportive of me. Obviously, one of the best ways is subscribing on YouTube, as well as following me on Twitter, Pop Anime Comics, Instagram, Pop Anime Comics, Facebook is Pop Anime Comics, YouTube is Pop Anime Comics, because that is really, really helpful. Share out my content, like my content, come bother me, tell somebody all that stuff goes a long, long way. And if you do have money and you want to be supportive and you have a project, obviously I do offer live reads. I offer a lot of different services, and I can be very helpful, as well as I do consult on a bunch of different topics. And so if you want one-on-one time with me versus just a simple question, I'm always happy to answer questions for free. But if you actually want me to consult and maybe provide my perspective, which is more eBay and things like that, or even how to set up an eBay store, obviously that is something that I am very good at, and I've been doing it forever. And then on top of that, and I really haven't been talking about it lately, if ever, I have this in hollow foil. I bought all 15 of them. And this is not going to be a one-off, because I did buy all 15 of this one too. So I have those 2 print runs, and I probably will be buying at least 3 or 4 more this year. So if you're interested in that comic and you want it, just hit me up, and I'll hook you up. And all I have to say is that if you know anything about My Hero Academia, she's a tough rabbit. That's all I'm going to say about her. She's a tough rabbit, and she's like my idol. So I don't want to be that guy who ruins things, but that's everything that I got. And appreciate everybody watching, and I'll give you the final word.
The final word is, like you said, support indie. I like that slogan.
And I don't think I could have said that any better myself, everybody. That is a